Johnson, my partner. We're presenting the case Health Management. It's a pretty fraud 101 case. It's something that after taking financial one-on-one, you would pretty much commit this fraud. It's basic inventory fraud and then a little bit of accounts receivable. Darian will be kind of giving the overview of the case in general, what exactly occurred, what went on, the key players and everything. And then I will follow up with the relationship to the audit committee, everything the AICPA put out, and the SEC. And then specifically, our case is particularly significant, not because of the fraud that occurred or anything because of that matter. It was a very big legal battle involving the PSLRA, which is the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act, which tried to help out the accounting firms and was kind of a form of tort firm. So I'll turn it over to Darian for the time being.
All right, I'm going to talk about the key players right now. Clifford Hott, he was a licensed pharmacist, a PhD in nuclear pharmacology, a former president of the New York State Board of Pharmacy. He founded healthcare, or it was home care management at the time, in 1986. Drew Bergman, which is the company's CFO, he was the biggest, probably the biggest part of the fraud. He masterminded. And he was a former auditor of BDO Seaman. BDO Seaman was the previously Seaman, known today as BDO USA. It's headquartered in downtown Chicago. I'm going to butcher her name, but Mia Tsai. She was an extremely close friend of Bergman and a former colleague and work partner. She was an auditor with BDO during the HMI fraud and previous. That's where Bergman and her met each other, became close. Paul Jurewicz was given the position of CFO after the fraud went down, after Bergman was demoted kind of to corporate development officer. There were 7 other employees that were involved with the fraud. They included pharmacists, delivery driver, which delivered the drugs that were en route, and the controller, the company controller. Now I'm going to give an overview of Health Management. It was founded as Home Care Management in 1986, as I said before. They started off small, selling medical supplies and equipment to the public and individuals and firms that provide in-home health services. In the early to mid-1990s is when they went public, and they expanded very rapidly. He renamed it Health Management, has a better ring to it than Home Care Management is. They specialize in chronic diseases, so like anything from AIDS to schizophrenia to Alzheimer's. And those drugs were very expensive. That's why they were able to have those that much inventory in transit. In June 1995, Bergman informed Hott that the earnings that weren't going to hit what they expected them to hit. They expected them to hit 74 cents per share, and they only had 54 cents per share. Hott stated that Health Management would not take a hit, and he made it very, very clear to Bergman that he would not have this low of earnings per share when it was anticipated that it would be much higher. And Bergman he didn't understand at first. He was telling Hope like the year already ended, like it's June, like, or it's May. What are you talking about? And then he like kept hinting at fraud, and then finally Bergman gave in, and he went to his office and like schemed about it. Hott showed that he had an incentive and attitude to reach earnings and pressured Bergman into doing so. Bergman, like I said, did not want to do it at first, but he said that if Hott found if he found people that would do it, then he would mastermind it. Bergman was insinuating that if the circumstances that existed that provided an opportunity to commit fraud. The plan took 2 weeks to find the people willing to carry out the fraud, and when he found the people that could commit the fraud, it took like a week for him executed. The audit firm, BDO Seaman, was due to come in the third week when the actual fraud would occur, and they actually prevented them from coming in because of close friendship between Cy and Bergman. They increased the inventory to $1.8 million, so then that the net income would obviously go up. They did it in two sections, which I don't really understand why they did it in two, and maybe not broken down a little bit more. But basically, one was for $1.3 million, and one was for $500,000. They broke it up into two different transactions. And the $1.3 million was going from Pittsburgh warehouse to a New York warehouse. And the New York warehouse got the shipment too late to be counted, and the Pittsburgh shipment went out earlier than the year ended. And then with the $500,000, they just did the exact opposite. They left New York before it could be counted in the year end, and they got to Pittsburgh at too late. Allowance for doubtful accounts was $600,000 less than they suggested. They argued that, the auditors argued that it should be $1.2 million, but they came to an agreement. It's still there. Shortly after the audit was concluded, HMI went with the new CFO to try to try to take some heat off. Paul Jurewicz was given the position of CFO after Bergman was made corporate development officer. Jurewicz uncovered the fraud by talking to a controller, one of the 7 employees that were involved in it. And the controller was really just talking to him kind of casually about it, like it wasn't a big deal. And Jurewicz was like, what are you talking about? And he went to Hoffman. And Hart denied everything that Jurewicz was talking about, so then Jurewicz took it into his own hands and informed the company's legal counsel. And that resulted in a press release, which then resulted in their shares, the price per share.
There's a lot of like things that were pretty alarming just overall to the internal control and nature of the business. One of them, for example, was they received, during the fraud, BDO Seaman received an anonymous letter that most of the time, I understand it's a big company and they're kind of growing fast, so you have to take with a grain of salt an anonymous letter. But it pretty much, in the end, exactly described every fraud that was occurring, and they never found out who actually wrote it. But a lot of people think it was somebody within the company and one of the 7 people involved in the fraud. Another one that was really weird to me was that the previous auditors left and didn't do the before BDO Seaman, they did not do they left auditing them because of they did not agree with their inventory and accounts receivable transactions. So there was a red flag that directly correlated to the fraud that they were committing in 1995. The SEC wrote, which is a rare occurrence, wrote a letter to BDO Seaman describing that they need to take particular caution when looking at the allowance for doubtful accounts in respect to HMI. And then just overall the nature of the inventory transfer. Every time you read the audit standards and everything, you'll see that it always says watch things close to dates that are big in nature. So it was big in nature. It was 50% of their usual inventory they had at that time, and then on top of that, it's just right at the year end and it's in transit, and it's a very odd occurring thing for this company to do. On top of that, it was in a van that they used, and they usually used UPS ground or just a normal postal service. And then it was in a van, so it wasn't even a big thing, but that you can make sense of that because they sell pills, so you can stock $1.3 million worth of inventory in a van, but still very weird. The accounts receivable was another area of fraud. Not anything too major that lit up to them, and that lit up to BDO Seaman initially, because you're not allowed to give an overwhelming like suggestion to anybody. In the end, it's that you're auditing them, and it's their financial statement. So if they think $600,000 is enough for their allowance for doubtful accounts, you kind of have to just let them go with it. But the fact the SEC had written a letter previously maybe should have given them an increased level of professional skepticism. They suggested raising it $1.2 million, and then they were fighting tooth and nail about it, and HMI just refused to budge, which should have been another alarming factor, because the refusal to budge is suggesting that they have a number and a quota they want to hit, whether they don't want to be out leveraged for a certain reason, or they have to meet earnings per share, or they want a certain amount of net income, or they truthfully believe that they're some of the best collectors. There could be several factors that you need to take into account when you're auditing a company like that. Independence was a big issue in this case as well, because as alluded to before, Bergman and my Ty were very, very close friends. Like it said in the case that they would spend holidays and take vacations with each other. And I don't know about you guys, but personally, like anybody who comes to Easter with my family or comes to Christmas or we go on vacation with, we generally tend to be pretty close with them. And even if you do work with that person, at what point does it get to a point where your personal relationship is always going to outweigh your professional relationship? For example, like if I work with my mom, I'm no matter what, like if something goes wrong at work, I'd commit heinous crimes for my mother. You know, it's just your mom and who it is, and obviously they were getting to that point in a relationship where they were valuing their personal relationship more than a professional relationship. And on top of that, she was offered a job as the CFO during the audit itself, which is another thing that just in general seems bizarre to anybody standing here. That, you know, if it's just like if a cop comes into your bar, or you know, somebody comes in to review food for your restaurant, and you tell him, yeah, you can be my head chef after this. If we, you know, obviously he's going to be a little more lenient on your health grade if he realizes he has a job on the line and can't close you down for any health-related issues. The AICPA, it was pretty vague and broad, and their guidance and suggestions for what independence actually is. All it said was independence requires continuing assessment of client relationships and public responsibility. It alluded to that you're going to somewhat of an extent from working with somebody, develop a personal friendship and relationship. And all it really says is you just need to continue to look at it and be honest and professional and look out for the best interests of the public. And like I said with my mom, I could never, you know, at one point you need to look at yourself as an auditor and say, I no longer am independent, I can no longer do this anymore. Fraud 101, as I said right at the beginning of this, it was the most basic fraud you could ever go through. You know, it's really, and that's what you get when you have a CEO who has no background in financial statements and is just a pharmaceutical guy. My mom, who works in the medical field, always jokes about all these doctors who can get all the clients but can't handle the money, and it was obviously a case like this. The guy had good pharmacists working for him, producing good drugs. He could make, you know, a fair amount of sales, but I'm sure there was other ventures that he struggled with in overall financial handling. So the first thing in Section 68, when they're talking about how to handle fraud and what to look for, one of the first things they say is last-minute adjustments, and they had a very big one. About 50% of their whole inventory was moved right around the date financial statements were going to go in a year. In a year, they were going to post below average earnings per share. So those are all things that there was an incentive for them to have, and there's incentive for them to do it. They had an attitude of, we're just trying to help out. We're just trying to help out our people. You know, we're trying to help out our stockholders. We don't want them to lose money. So their attitude was that of saving everything. And those doctors, you know, I'm not saying it because we're business people, but there is generally a thing. Some of those science people with PhDs, you can see it. There's a joke, they say, what's the difference between an orthopedic surgeon and God? God doesn't think he's an orthopedic surgeon. So many of these doctors feel that in the business world it's simple and they can just do it. And so he kind of had an attitude, and it became apparent with his conversation with Bergman, that he thought, I can just do this. Like, I'm smart, nobody's going to catch me. We're going to make 74 cents per share earning. And then he put tremendous pressure on people as well. Imagine going into, anybody you have to deal with and talking to them and then hearing them say, we're going to do it this way. I always picture, like, if Nate played basketball and, you're kind of the enforcer guy. People used to have those on basketball teams where they would say, hey, I know you might not like it, but you're going to go foul that guy hard. And it's hard. It would be hard for Nate to ever say, or Tori or anybody to ever say to a coach, hey, I can't do that. And you understand for Bergman the situation he was put in. He kind of moraled it out to himself that, if I don't put the people together, all I'm doing is all my boss asked me, he asked me to cook the books, and I cooked the books. But after all that, with the inventory and the reasoning behind it, the auditor still should have caught it. Section 19 of the audit thing states that you can be just in trouble because of material misstatements and your test won't work. So I understand that, like, everything was factual because there was such a good cover-up and so many people were in on it, the two Haught and Bergman and then the lower level employees. So the evidence was there, they had all the paper and everything, but professional skepticism should have led them to do an inventory rollback, just as I alluded to before, because of the simple nature of the thing. So an inventory rollback is real basic. They don't really, it's not specifically the guideline, but it's what, an 8th grader would do if you told them, I bought so many of these and how many of them did I have beforehand? So you just take out what you purchased and then you count the inventory. So if you were to have done that for their inventory, obviously you would remove it and you would be $1.8 million short any way you cut it. So if you did a roll forward or a roll back, you would keep seeing that $1.8 million is either in the roll forward or the roll back, but it's always short one way or the other. And it's generally used when auditors are unable or incapable of verifying a date, and you're just not there and cannot count at the year end. And in the expert witness said that it would have obviously caught it right away, like I said, because either way, it takes not much intelligence to realize that $1.8 million keeps switching over from pile to pile. And then it was that in-transit inventory never really existed and was its. What's the significance of this case? The fraud wasn't huge. It wasn't, any Enron. It was nothing to the extent of materiality to the general business world. But what made it such a big deal was the Private Securities Litigation Act. It was the first thing passed by Congress, not vetoed by Bill Clinton during his first administration. So that was kind of a big deal. And what it did is it just tried to protect all the international accounting firms and anybody who was getting burnt out. Because as we always learn in class, it's the accounting firms and auditors everybody goes after because they're the ones with monies left. And so what they did is they did a proportional liability. The big 6 accounting firms really spend a lot of money on lobbying to get to this proportional liability. So what it was saying is, if I'm running a business and I audit you, you can't hold me fully responsible because I did the best I could. And that's what made this such a significant case, is because that held up in court. So first off, there was a lot of specific issues with the case. It was a jury of blue-collar people. So I don't know, my dad never went to college a day in his life, but if I talked to him about financial stuff, he didn't know what I'm talking about. So I can only imagine my dad on that jury trying to explain to him about what inventory rollback is. I don't think my dad could tell you what an audit is. let alone that. So that was a very specific problem. And then the proportionate liability, they're trying to figure out how to weigh it correctly, because what percent are they liable for the fraud and the loss in earnings from the stockholders? And it made it tricky, particularly for the plaintiffs, because while the plaintiffs really wanted to indict BDO Seidman and get money out of them, it was a thin line, because a lot of their cases, they could not cross over into blaming Haught and Bergman and all of them too much, because it would degrade the proportional liability held by BDO Seidman. So the worse Haught and Bergman were made to look, the better the audit firm was made to look. So, and then recklessness, it was like the buzzword of the day in that court, is did they commit reckless fraud, reckless behavior in respects to their due care? And there's a million ways to look at it and cut it down. And did they purposefully or like lazily do anything? That's the $1 million question: is in due care, were you lazy or were you intent enough? And should they have performed an inventory rollback? Probably. But they ended up winning the case, and it was a very small proportional share. They were found like minimally negligent, or they ended up not paying much. However, there's been a lot of issues with this lately, because PricewaterhouseCoopers ran analysts were analyzing what they have been paying after this case, and they have found that audit firms have been paying an average of $20 million in private security cases, and that's a lot of money, even if you're doing it proportionally. The results: Cliff Hoyt was the only one really punished in the entire thing. He received 9 years, a $250,000 fine, $9.6 million restitution. The SEC claimed in a report that the stock of HMI dropped 28% after the fraudulent things came out. And then obviously the PLSRA really helped BDO Seidman in that situation, because not only did they continue to operate after that and serve as auditors for many people, they actually grow and now have merged with a few other corporate firms. Questions?
Is the PSLRA, is it like fluctuate on the liability, or is it like strict level now with the auditors?
It fluctuates. It's just, I mean, you probably pay attention, you're a pretty political guy, so it's just like anything in torts nowadays. It's just people are held obnoxiously liable, and with the way our court system is determined, all it takes is one judge to say, hey, you owe a bunch of money because you specifically did this and you're in trouble.
I think it was fair that Bergman got like granted immunity or whatever.
No, I thought he was kind of like he kind of seemed fake to me and just like not a good guy through my reading. But I mean, I get it. They had just passed that case, so obviously they're going to try and be fair and lenient on it. Like, especially when it's the first watershed big case, they're going to kind of follow it to a T. And since he really didn't do a whole bunch long and blamed Hoyt for a lot of things, and he did give himself up, you know. But a plea bargain's a plea bargain. And that's just the nature of how it works.
I think he should have had a little bit of time, because it was pretty fast one, but it wasn't like he was just there. He actually thought about it and did it.
When BDO Seidman originally gave their unqualified opinion for HMI in their financial statements,